The scream tore through the night like a sharpened blade, high and desperate, coming from a boy who was running through the drenched streets of New York, his brand-name sneakers splashing dirty water with every step. His small hands trembled, stained with a red that wasn't his, but the blood of the man he loved most in the world. 7-year-old Liam Morgan didn't know where to go. This wasn't his safe Upper East Side neighborhood, with doormen and cameras on every corner. This was a place where dim lights flickered over narrow alleys, where his father, James Morgan, the young CEO who had built a tech empire before 35, now lay motionless against a brick wall 3 blocks back. A deep wound gaped in his left side, the result of a knife that went in fast and came out slow, leaving a scarlet trail that seemed endless. The driver had tried a shortcut through the Bronx, thinking he'd save 15 minutes, but instead, he found 3 men in dark suits who didn't want the expensive wallet or the Swiss watch. They wanted something far more precious. They wanted permanent silence. You are about to hear a beautiful, moving story. Please subscribe to the channel and comment with where you're from. "Help! Somebody, please, my dad is dying." The words came out in ragged bursts from Liam's throat as he ran past people who averted their eyes, who pulled their children inside, who pretended not to hear. In this forgotten part of the city, everyone looked out for their own survival, and a crying boy was just another sound in the urban symphony of despair. But then Liam saw her, a small, huddled figure near a rusty dumpster covered by a blanket that had once been pink, but was now just a mass of torn, filthy fabric. When she lifted her head, he noticed tangled blonde hair falling over a face too thin for a child, and blue eyes that seemed to have seen things no child ever should. There was a frightening depth in them, as if this tiny girl had already lived several lifetimes in her few years. "Please," Liam's voice came out in a hoarse whisper as he knelt in front of her, not caring that his knees sank into the muddy puddle. "I need help. There's a man back there, and he's not moving, and there's so much blood, and I don't know what to do." Most children would have screamed or run or frozen in fear, but this girl just looked at Liam's trembling, red-stained hands, then into his eyes, filled with pure panic. Something in her shifted, as if a switch had been flipped. She stood up with a calmness that defied her age and her situation. "Take me to him." Those were the only words that left her mouth, her voice raspy from disuse, from having learned that silence was sometimes the best way to survive. Liam didn't question it. He didn't ask who she was or why a child was living alone on the streets. He just grabbed her cold, thin hand and pulled her back through the wet streets, his lungs burning, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears like war drums announcing a battle he didn't know if he could win. When they reached the dark alley where James was slumped, the girl didn't hesitate for a second. She knelt beside him with movements that seemed rehearsed 100 times, her small hands moving with purpose over the CEO's inert body as she pressed 2 fingers against his neck, searching for a pulse. Liam watched, mesmerized, as this street child did things he didn't even know existed, checking his breathing, examining the wound with clinical eyes that didn't match her size. "Take off your jacket." The command came firmly, and Liam obeyed without thinking, shrugging off the expensive jacket his grandmother had given him for his last birthday. The girl took the fabric and folded it tightly, creating a makeshift compress that she pressed against James's wound with a surprising strength for someone so small. Then she tore her own tattered sweater into long strips, which she used to tie around the injured man's torso, creating pressure on the bleeding point. Every movement was precise, calculated, as if she had done this many times before. "How do you know how to do this?" Liam whispered, a mix of awe and fear in his voice, but the girl didn't answer immediately. She was busy checking James's airway, tilting his head back slightly, placing her dirty blanket over his legs to maintain body heat. Only after she had finished all these steps did she finally look at Liam, with those 2 old eyes, and say in an almost inaudible voice, "My dad taught me before he—" She stopped mid-sentence, as if the next words were shards of glass in her throat, as if completing that thought would open a wound that was still bleeding inside her. Sirens finally tore through the night's silence, red and white lights painting the alley walls. Paramedics rushed in with their equipment bags, their professional voices filling the air with medical terms, Liam didn't fully understand. But he understood the look of surprise on the lead paramedic's face when the man saw the makeshift bandage, the way the wound had been stabilized. He turned to the girl with genuine respect in his eyes. "You did this, sweetie?" the paramedic asked, and the girl just nodded, her eyes already searching for an exit, already planning her escape. Staying meant questions, and questions meant authorities, and authorities meant the system that had failed to protect her when she needed it most. "How old are you?" he insisted. Her voice was a thin thread when she replied, 7. The paramedic shook his head in disbelief as his colleagues placed James on a stretcher, stabilizing his vital signs, preparing him for urgent transport. "So you saved his life, kid. You bought him the time he needed." The paramedic's words hung in the damp air, but when Liam turned to properly thank his savior, to ask her name, to offer help, she had vanished like smoke in the night breeze. All that was left was a strip of pink fabric on the wet ground, proof that she had really existed, that she hadn't just been a hallucination born of desperation. Liam called out for her, even though he didn't know her name, shouting into the darkness that had swallowed her. But he received only silence in return. The ambulance sped through the streets of New York, sirens slicing through the early morning. Inside, Liam held his father's cold hand while the paramedics worked with practiced efficiency, inserting IV lines, monitoring blood pressure, doing everything they could to keep that heart beating until they reached St. Luke's Hospital. For a brief moment, James's eyes fluttered open, glassy from blood loss and shock. He whispered through the oxygen mask, "Did you see her, son? Did you see the angel?" Liam didn't know what to say because she hadn't looked like an angel. She just looked like a scared, lonely girl who knew things no child should ever have to know. 3 days dragged on like 3 years, while James remained unconscious in a private hospital room, tubes and wires connecting his body to machines that beeped and whirred, monitoring every beat, every breath, every sign that life still pulsed within him. Liam didn't leave his bedside except for quick showers or to eat food that tasted like nothing, because his mind was stuck in that rainy night, in that dark alley, with that mysterious girl who appeared when they needed her most and then disappeared without a trace. The police came to ask questions, officers in suits who wrote everything down in their notebooks, but seemed skeptical when Liam described the girl, as if he had invented a hero to make sense of the trauma, as if street kids with medical knowledge were characters from fantasy and not the raw reality of the city. But Liam insisted. "She was real. She saved my dad. She knew exactly what to do." The officers exchanged glances that clearly said they thought the boy was in shock, processing the trauma of seeing his father nearly die by creating narratives to cope with the fear. When James finally woke up on the morning of the 4th day, his first word was a name he didn't know. "Ava," he whispered, and then his voice grew stronger. "The girl. Did you find the girl who saved me?" Liam felt hot tears stream down his cheeks as he held his father's hand. "She's gone, Dad. I looked everywhere, but she vanished as if she never existed." Something in James's expression shifted in that moment, a steely determination rising from beneath the pain and exhaustion. "We'll find her," James said, with a firmness that allowed no argument. "I don't care how long it takes or how many resources I have to use. We will find that girl. And when we do, I'm going to make sure she never has to sleep on the street again, never has to be alone again, never has to be afraid again." Liam nodded, because he felt the same way. That inexplicable connection that forms when someone saves you, or when you witness an act of courage so pure it changes something fundamental inside you. But what James and Liam didn't yet know was that the men who attacked the CEO that night weren't common muggers looking for easy cash. They were professional enforcers, carrying out orders from someone very powerful, someone who wanted James. Morgan eliminated for reasons that went far beyond business or competition. And the mysterious girl who saved his life, that street child with old eyes and skillful hands, she wasn't just a random witness who happened to know first aid. She was Ava Miller, daughter of John Miller, the paramedic who 6 months earlier had witnessed something he never should have seen. And the same men who took her parents from her now wanted to ensure she would never speak about what she knew, never tell what she saw, never connect the dots that would reveal a conspiracy that reached the very top of New York's power pyramid. Ava was, at that very moment, crouched on the fire escape outside James's room, watching through the window as the man she saved finally woke up. She saw the joy on his son's face and felt something tighten in her chest, an emotion she had buried 6 months ago when she hid in that closet, listening to her mother's final moments being stolen from her. It was an emotion called hope, and it was dangerous. Hope made people let their guard down. Hope made people believe they could have a future. And every time Ava allowed herself to hope, every time she thought she might be able to trust someone, she remembered the night she lost everything, and the fear would turn her blood to ice again. So she climbed down the fire escape, with silent movements she had perfected over months of living in the shadows, melting into the urban landscape, becoming invisible. She couldn't let that man and his son find her. Not yet. Not until she was sure they weren't connected to the people who had destroyed her life. 6 months earlier, Ava Miller was a completely different person. She was a girl who lived in a simple but loving apartment in Astoria, Queens, with her father, John Miller, and her mother, Sarah. Every night after dinner, her paramedic father would teach her things he said every human being should know: how to check vital signs, how to stop bleeding, how to recognize when someone needed urgent help. And she would ask with a child's curiosity, "Why do I need to know this stuff, Daddy?" He would always reply with a gentle smile, "Because knowledge is power, Princess. Because if you know how to help people, you'll never feel helpless in the face of the world." But he was wrong about that last part. 3 weeks after her 7th birthday, Ava felt more helpless than she ever imagined possible. Her father had witnessed something during an emergency call that he should have never seen. A meeting between men in expensive suits and drug dealers on a deserted street where a deal went wrong and shots were fired, leaving a young man bleeding on the asphalt. John Miller, being the honorable man he was, saved that life, but he also saw the faces, recognized the license plates of the official cars, and understood that this was bigger than common crime. It was corruption woven into the fabric of power. He told his wife he was going to testify because he had to do the right thing. Sarah held his hands and cried, but she agreed because she knew the man she had married, a man who couldn't stay silent in the face of injustice, even when silence meant safety. 3 days before John was scheduled to meet with federal prosecutors, men broke into their apartment during the night. Ava was playing hide-and-seek with her mother, and she was so well hidden in the bedroom closet that her mum couldn't find her before the front door was kicked in, and male voices filled the space with cold, indifferent commands. Ava froze in that dark closet, breathing in the scent of wood and mothballs as she heard her mother's screams, her father's harsh words trying to protect his family, and then the sounds that followed. Sounds she couldn't fully process because her 7-year-old mind had no reference for that kind of violence. And then came the silence heavy as lead, the kind of silence that tells you something fundamental has changed in the universe, that nothing will ever be the same again. She stayed in that closet for 8 full hours, barely daring to breathe, listening as the men searched every corner of the apartment, looking for something or someone. Their heavy boots passed so close to the closet that she could feel the vibrations in the floor. One of them said, "Miller had a daughter. The boss wants all loose ends tied up." Another replied, "We didn't find anything. Must be at a friend's. We'll come back tomorrow." When she finally heard the door close and the footsteps fade away, Ava waited another hour before she dared to move. And when she opened the closet door and stepped into the living room, she found police officers everywhere, yellow tape dividing the rooms, camera flashes photographing every detail, and 2 shapes covered with white sheets that she knew were her parents. Even if no one said it explicitly, even if everyone tried to shield her from the sight, even if a soft-spoken social worker tried to take her to a temporary shelter, promising that everything would be okay. But Ava knew nothing would ever be okay again. She had heard the men talking about tying up loose ends. She understood that if they found out she was alive, they would come back to finish the job. So when the social worker was distracted for a moment, talking to a police officer, Ava did what her father had taught her in so many practical lessons about urban survival. She made herself small, she made herself invisible. She slipped through the chaos of people and disappeared into the streets of New York, where she began a life no child should ever have to live. The first few days were the worst, sleeping in cardboard boxes behind closed shops, eating leftovers she found in trash cans, shivering from cold and fear in equal measure. But Ava had something many street kids didn't. She had the training her father had given her, never knowing he was preparing her to survive the unimaginable. She knew how to find clean water, how to recognize spoiled food, how to treat minor wounds, and most importantly, she knew how to watch, how to identify danger before it got too close. That's how she survived for 6 long months, learning the rhythms of the street, the safe places and the dangerous ones, the people who might help and those who would definitely hurt her. She developed an almost supernatural instinct for detecting when the men in suits were in the area looking for her, because they never completely gave up, never stopped searching for the girl who could one day connect the dots and expose everything they had done. During those months, Ava also did something no adult would expect from a child her age. She began to collect evidence. Using stolen disposable cameras, she photographed the same men who killed her parents when she saw them on the streets, memorizing license plates, faces, patterns of movement. She broke into places a child shouldn't be able to access, using her small size as an advantage, slipping through windows, learning to pick simple locks from a veteran homeless man who took pity on her and taught her a few survival tricks. She was building a case piece by piece, photo by photo, because her father had died trying to do the right thing, and she wouldn't let that sacrifice be in vain. She wouldn't let those men continue to destroy lives with impunity. All this time, she carried a cheap flash drive on a chain around her neck, where she kept digital copies of everything she found, all the evidence that might one day bring justice for her family. It was this obsessive mission that led her to that alley on that rainy night. She had been following one of the men she recognized as part of the group that had invaded her apartment. When she saw the attack on James Morgan, when she realized it was the same enforcers, the same methods, the same calculated coldness, something inside her clicked. She understood she couldn't just stand by and watch. She couldn't let another family be destroyed the way hers had been. That's why she answered Liam's desperate cry. That's why she used everything her father had taught her to save a stranger's life. Because deep down, she was still the girl who believed that doing the right thing mattered, even when the whole world seemed to say otherwise. And now, crouched on that fire escape watching James wake up in the hospital, Ava made a decision that would change everything. She was going to trust them. She was going to risk getting closer because maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do this alone. Maybe there were people good enough to help her finish what her father had started. But before she could act on that decision, she needed to be absolutely sure that James Morgan wasn't connected to the men who had destroyed her life. She needed to investigate, to watch, to gather information. And so, Ava spent the next few weeks discreetly following the Morgan family, learning their patterns, their routines, looking for any sign that they might be dangerous. The more she watched, the more she saw things that reminded her of her own family. The way James looked at Liam with unconditional love. The way Liam talked excitedly about his school days, even while worried about his father's recovery. The way they supported each other through the pain and fear. It was during one of these observation sessions that Ava saw something that changed everything. She saw a man in a dark suit, a man she recognized as having been in the alley that night, standing outside the hospital smoking a cigarette and talking on the phone. Ava's instincts screamed danger. This man wasn't there by chance. He was watching, waiting, planning something. When she got close enough to hear fragments of the conversation, her blood ran cold. "The target is still alive," the man said in a low but clear voice. "Yes, the kid visits every day. Morgan is asking questions about the street girl, trying to find her." There was a pause where someone was obviously speaking on the other end. "No, we haven't located the Miller kid yet. But if she shows up near Morgan again, same protocol as the family. No survivors, no witnesses." Ava backed away slowly, every cell in her body buzzing with adrenaline and fear. Now she understood completely. James Morgan wasn't the enemy. He was another victim, another target of the same men who killed her parents. And those men knew she had helped James, knew she was a witness, knew that if she and James connected, they could pool enough information to expose the entire operation. She had to warn them. She had to protect them. But how could she do it without exposing herself completely, without putting everyone in even greater danger? It was while she wrestled with these impossible questions that Ava made the bravest decision of her short life. She was going to stop hiding. She was going to stop doing this alone. She was going to trust that there were people in the world who still fought for what was right, even when doing the right thing was dangerous, even when it could cost them everything. The decision to trust did not come easily for Ava. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to keep running, to remain in the shadows where she had survived for 6 hard months. But something fundamental had shifted when she heard that man talk about the same protocol, when she realized that James and Liam were heading for the same fate that had claimed her parents unless someone did something, unless she used the knowledge she had so meticulously gathered. That night, she broke into the hospital's security office using skills she had perfected on the street. Slipping through a maintenance door no one checked properly, finding the camera system that recorded every hallway, every entrance, every movement. She needed concrete proof, video evidence that showed the men who attacked James, that connected that attack to the same criminals who had killed her family. She worked quickly, her hands surprisingly nimble for a child, navigating the digital menus, finding the footage from the night of the attack, and copying everything to her flash drive. She was so focused on the task that she didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway until it was almost too late, until the doorknob began to turn and she had only seconds to hide. Ava threw herself under the control desk, pulling herself into the narrow space between the file cabinets and the wall, making her body small, controlling her breath. She recognized the expensive shoes of the man who entered, the same man with the cigarette, the same man whose words on the phone had revealed his deadly intentions. He spoke into his phone again. Someone's been in here. Someone accessed the footage from the night of the Morgan attack. On the other end, Ava imagined orders were being given, because the man connected something to the computer and began deleting the files, destroying evidence, covering their tracks. Ava's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it, each beat a drum announcing her position. But she forced herself to remain absolutely still, absolutely silent. She heard the man say, "Done, no record of what happened that night. Now about the girl. If she's collecting evidence, it means she's staying in the area, probably watching Morgan. We'll set up surveillance. When she shows up, standard protocol." After he left, Ava waited 5 full minutes that felt like 5 hours before she dared to move. When she finally crawled out of her hiding spot, she checked her flash drive with trembling hands and found that the footage was still there. The man had wiped the hard drive, but he hadn't thought to check for external devices, hadn't imagined that a 7-year-old would be smart enough to make a copy before he arrived. Ava felt a small victory in that moment, even knowing the war was far from over. She knew she couldn't delay any longer. She had to talk to James, had to warn him about the danger. But how could she do it safely? How could she approach without putting them all in the immediate crosshairs of those men? It was while she was planning her next move that she heard something that made her blood freeze. Voices in the hallway, multiple voices, men communicating on radios. She understood they had discovered the breach faster than she expected, that they were sweeping the hospital, looking for her at that very moment. Ava ran, her bare feet silent on the cold linoleum. She rounded a corner and saw more men coming from the opposite direction. She was cornered with no obvious way out. It was then that she thought of her father's words. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't to fight alone, princess. Sometimes it's knowing when to ask for help. Ava made a choice that contradicted all her survival instincts. She ran not away from James Morgan, but towards him. She sprinted down the hall towards his room, men shouting behind her, gaining on her, nearly grabbing her. She burst through the door of his room just as fingers brushed the back of her dirty shirt. "Please." The word came out as a desperate cry as Ava threw herself behind the hospital bed. "They're going to kill me, just like they killed my parents. Just like they tried to kill you, Mr. Morgan. Please don't let them kill me too." She saw James's expression change from surprise to fierce determination as he understood who she was, the girl he had been searching for weeks. The little hero who saved his life finally appearing, but under terrible circumstances. "No one is going to hurt you," James said with an authority that made Liam run to stand in front of Ava as well, forming a human barrier of protection. When 3 men in dark suits entered the room with cold, professional expressions, James pressed the nurse call button and said in a firm voice, "This child is under my protection. If you want to take her, you'll have to go through the police, social services, and my lawyers. I've already called Detective Rossi and she's on her way." It was a bluff, but a good one. Those men couldn't risk a public scene, not with hospital staff potentially on their way, not with witnesses. Their leader looked at Ava with eyes that promised this wasn't over before turning and leaving with his companions, disappearing like shadows receding from the light. Ava collapsed against the wall, trembling uncontrollably now that the immediate danger had passed. Liam moved slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal. He held out his hand. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe now. My dad doesn't lie. If he said he'll protect you, he will." Ava looked at that outstretched hand, clean and cared for, so different from her own dirty, scratched ones. Then she looked at the faces of James and Liam, and she saw in them something she hadn't seen in 6 months. She saw people who genuinely wanted to help, without wanting anything in return. Slowly, hesitantly, she took Liam's hand. "They killed my mum and dad because my dad was going to testify about something he saw," Ava whispered, her voice broken. "And now they want to kill me too. And they'll kill you if you help me. I didn't want to bring this to you, but I had nowhere else to go." The tears finally came. Tears she had held back for 6 months. Tears for everything she had lost and everything she could still lose. James picked up his phone. And this time he really did call Detective Olivia Rossi. When the detective arrived 30 minutes later, with 2 uniformed officers, Ava told her story for the first time completely. From the closet to the street, from the evidence she collected to the present danger. She handed over the flash drive that contained months of meticulous work, months of observation and documentation that a 7-year-old should never have had to do. Olivia Rossi, a woman in her 40s with kind but sharp eyes, knelt down to Ava's level. "You are the bravest girl I have ever met, Ava Miller," she said. "And we are going to make sure the people who did this to your family pay for what they did. I promise you that." There was something in her voice, a sincere conviction, that made Ava believe that maybe finally she had found real allies in this impossible fight. In the hours that followed, Olivia connected the flash drive to her laptop. What appeared on the screen made her face turn pale. The evidence Ava had collected was extraordinary. Photographs of known figures in meetings that shouldn't be happening, footage of the attack on James that clearly showed faces and license plates, documents Ava had photographed during her break-ins at offices showing connections between organized crime and government officials. Everything was meticulously organized, dated, and categorized with an attention to detail that rivaled professional investigations. "How did you get all this?" Olivia asked, a mix of admiration and disbelief in her voice. Ava simply replied, "My dad taught me to pay attention. He said details can save lives. I needed to save mine. I needed to make sure his sacrifice meant something." Olivia then understood that she wasn't dealing with an ordinary traumatized child. She was dealing with someone who had turned her trauma into a mission, her pain into purpose, her fear into determination. But the news wasn't all good. Olivia explained that the evidence implicated powerful people, including high-ranking politicians, corrupt police officials, and judges who turned a blind eye to crimes as long as they got their cut. This meant they couldn't trust the normal system. They couldn't just present the evidence and expect justice to run its course, because the system was infected from within, compromised at levels that made every action dangerous. "We need to move slowly," Olivia said. "Build an ironclad case. Make sure that when we move, we can take them all down at once. Because if they find out we're investigating, they'll destroy evidence, disappear witnesses, make it all look like it never happened." But she looked at Ava and added, "You're not alone anymore, kid. Now you have people fighting on your side. And we will finish this. We'll make your father proud." James, who had been watching everything quietly, finally spoke. "She's staying with us. I'll start the legal process to become her temporary guardian. She needs a safe place and a family. And Liam has been on his own since he lost his mother. Maybe we all need each other." Ava looked at him with wide eyes. The offer was so unexpected, so generous, so frightening in its possibility of hope. "I don't want to be a burden," Ava whispered. James laughed, a gentle, sad laugh. "You saved my life, kid. How could that possibly be a burden? Besides, you and Liam already seem to have a connection. He needs a sister as much as you need a family. So what do you say? Want to try being a part of our family?" Ava couldn't speak, her throat tight with emotion, but she nodded her head. A small but definitive movement that would change the course of all their lives forever. Liam pulled her into a hug that she returned hesitantly at first, then with growing force. She was so tired of being strong alone, so tired of being afraid, so tired of having no one. But the danger had not passed. In fact, it was just beginning. That very night, while Ava slept for the first time in a real bed in the guest room of the Morgans mansion in Westchester County, surrounded by private security James had hired, the men who wanted her dead were meeting in a dark office in downtown Manhattan. They were planning their next move, discussing how to eliminate the problem before the evidence could be used against them. They came to a simple, brutal conclusion. If they couldn't get to Ava easily, they would do something that would force her to expose herself. They would threaten the only thing she had left to lose, her new family. And with that decision made, they began to prepare an attack that would test not only Ava's courage, but the strength of the bonds she had only just begun to form with James and Liam. The dawn broke softly over Westchester, but it brought with it a tension Ava could feel in her bones. She woke up in the guest room that James had turned into a welcoming space, with peach-colored walls and a bed with sheets that smelled of lavender, so different from the cardboard boxes and cold alleys where she had slept for months. For a moment, she just lay there, soaking in the feeling of being safe before the reality of the danger settled back onto her shoulders like a lead cloak. In the 2 weeks that followed, Ava began to learn what it meant to have a family again. Liam taught her how to play video games, and she discovered she was surprisingly good at strategy. James took her to buy new clothes, and she chose practical pieces she could run in if she needed to. Old habits died hard. They enrolled her in therapy with Dr. Helena Ramos, a psychologist specializing in childhood trauma, who didn't pressure Ava to talk, but created safe spaces where the words could emerge in their own time. But while Ava tried to build some semblance of normalcy, Detective Rossi and her team of federal investigators worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Using Ava's evidence, they mapped out the entire corruption network, identifying every player, every connection, every weak point they could exploit. They discovered that it all led to one man, Senator Richard Caldwell, a charismatic politician running for governor of New York on a promise to fight crime when in reality, he was the maestro orchestrating the symphony of corruption that infected the city. It was John Miller, Ava's father, who had witnessed Caldwell at a crime scene 6 months earlier, present at a meeting with drug traffickers that went wrong. When John said he would testify, when he refused the threats and the bribes, Caldwell ordered his elimination. An honest paramedic could not be allowed to destroy decades of power building. The attack on James Morgan followed the same logic. The encryption software James's company was developing for government contracts would have exposed Caldwell's secret communications with organized crime, so the CEO had to be silenced before the contract was signed. Now, with Ava under protection and the evidence being compiled, Caldwell knew his empire was threatened. That 7-year-old girl had become the greatest threat to his existence. He made a desperate decision. He ordered a final assault on the Morgan mansion, a coordinated invasion to seize any evidence and eliminate all witnesses in one brutal move. He didn't know that his phone call giving those orders had been intercepted by Detective Rossi, who now had probable cause for arrest warrants, but still hadn't identified all the criminals. She needed a few more days to ensure the entire network could be brought down at once. 3 days before the deadline Rossi had set for the arrests, the attack came on a sunny afternoon. Ava and Liam were in the backyard pool. Ava had confessed she never really learned how to swim, and Liam had made it his personal mission to change that. They were laughing, truly laughing, when the security alarm began to blare loud and shrill. Ava saw James running towards them, shouting for them to get inside to go to the panic room in the basement. She saw the smoke beginning to rise from the front of the property. Where Molotov cocktails had been thrown through the windows, Liam froze in fear. But Ava, who had survived 6 months on the street, who had developed survival instincts as sharp as razors, grabbed his hand and pulled. "Run!" she yelled. "Don't look back, just run." They shot across the lawn towards the back door as armed men stormed the front, as the fire spread far too quickly, consuming curtains and furniture, filling the air with black, toxic smoke. James reached them and pushed them inside, locking doors behind them. They ran to the basement where the panic room offered reinforced walls and an independent phone line, which James used to call 911 to call Detective Rossi to call everyone who could help. Ava heard his steady voice giving the address and details while Liam clung to her, trembling. She held him back, thinking how the roles had reversed, how she who had been saved was now offering comfort. The attackers knew about the panic room. They shouted from outside, demanding that Ava come out, promising that no one else would be hurt if she just gave herself up. For a terrible moment, Ava considered it, considered sacrificing herself to save James and Liam, to protect the people who had shown her kindness when the whole world seemed cruel. But James gripped her shoulders and said, "Don't even think about it for a second. We're family now, and family doesn't abandon each other, no matter what. So we stay together, we fight together, we survive together." Sirens finally tore through the air, many sirens, police and firefighters and federal agents. Detective Rossi had anticipated that something like this might happen and had kept teams on high alert. The attackers fled when they realized they were outmatched, leaving destruction but not victory, leaving a burned house but an intact family. When it was finally safe to leave the panic room, when Ava saw what was left of the first real home she'd had in 6 months, she didn't cry. Instead, she looked at James and Liam, covered in soot but alive, and she said, "We won. They tried to break us, but we won." Detective Rossi arrived with bad news tempered by good. The mansion was destroyed, but they had captured 2 of the attackers. Under interrogation, the men began to talk, giving names, details, connections. With those confessions added to Ava's evidence, the case was finally complete, strong enough to survive any legal challenge, comprehensive enough to take down the entire network at once. "We're arresting all of them tomorrow," Rossi said, "but you 3 need to go to a federal safe house. Somewhere no one knows, somewhere you can stay until the trials are over. This is going to take months, maybe years, and you need to be protected through all of it." James nodded, accepting the necessity, even as he hated the idea of living in hiding. Ava wondered if her life would ever be normal, if she could ever just be a kid without looking over her shoulder. The arrest of Senator Caldwell happened at dawn, with dozens of federal agents coordinating raids simultaneously in 20 different locations, catching corrupt politicians in their homes, police officers in their precincts, criminals in their hideouts. It was like watching a spider's web unravel thread by thread. When the news showed Caldwell being led away in handcuffs, when the anchor explained the charges of corruption and conspiracy to commit murder, Ava felt something shift inside her. It wasn't exactly relief, because the pain of losing her parents would never fully disappear, but it was justice. It was validation. It was proof that her father had not died in vain. The trial began 4 months later, in a federal courtroom packed with journalists and onlookers. Ava had to testify. She had to sit in that witness chair that seemed to swallow her whole and answer questions about the most terrifying night of her life, about the months she spent alone, about the evidence she collected with a determination that defied her age. When the defense attorney tried to discredit her, tried to paint her as a troubled child who made up stories, James stood up in the gallery and said, "That girl saved my life. That girl survived the impossible. That girl has more integrity and courage than all of us put together. So you will respect her." The jury took only 2 hours to deliberate. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimonies corroborating. When the guilty verdict was read on all charges, when the judge sentenced Caldwell to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Ava finally allowed herself to feel that maybe, just maybe, she could stop running. She could start building a future instead of just surviving the present. 3 months later, on a sunny Saturday morning, Ava was in family court for a very different hearing. She was wearing a blue dress that Liam had helped her pick out, her blonde hair finally clean and neat. When the judge asked if she understood what adoption meant, if this was what she truly wanted, Ava looked at James, who had kept every promise, and at Liam, who had become the brother she never had, and she said in a clear, certain voice, "Yes, Your Honor, I want to be part of this family forever. It is my honor to grant this adoption," the judge said, tears in her eyes, because she knew the whole story, knew the trauma and the courage and the resilience. "Ava Carolina Morgan, welcome officially to your family." There was applause in the room, and Ava ran into the arms of James and Liam. For the first time in almost a year, she felt whole. Not because she had forgotten her birth parents, but because she had learned that love is not a finite resource. You can love the people you've lost and love the people you've found. You can honor the past while building the future. The celebration was small and intimate at the new house James had bought in Park Slope, Brooklyn, far from the traumatic memories but still in New York, because this was Ava's city, her city, where she had lost everything and found everything again. Detective Rossi came with a special gift, a photo album of John and Sarah Miller that she had rescued from the family's belongings in a police evidence locker. Ava held the album to her chest and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for teaching me to be strong. Thank you, Mom, for teaching me to love. You will always be here with me." That night, Ava placed 2 photographs on her nightstand, one of her birth parents smiling on a beach, another of James and Liam making funny faces in the pool. She understood that she didn't have to choose between these families. She could carry both in her heart. She could be the daughter of John and Sarah always, and also be the daughter of James and the sister of Liam. Because family isn't just about who brought you into the world, but also about who chooses to stand by you when the world falls apart. The months turned into years, and Ava flourished in ways no one could have predicted on that rainy night in the alley. She excelled in school, especially in science, because she wanted to follow in her biological father's footsteps and become a paramedic one day to help people the way he had. She made friends who didn't know about the street girl she had been unless she chose to tell them. And she chose to tell them sometimes because her story was a part of her, and it was not something to be ashamed of. It was proof that human beings can survive the unimaginable when they have purpose and people they love. Liam became not just a brother, but a best friend. They were inseparable, doing homework together, playing video games, having long talks about dreams and fears and everything in between. When Liam entered his teenage years and began to have his own struggles, it was Ava who offered wisdom beyond her years, who reminded him that strength doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. James built an even bigger empire, but never let work consume his family. He was there for school recitals and soccer games, for family dinners and lazy weekends. He funded a non-profit organization dedicated to helping homeless children in New York, because he understood now how fragile the line was between safety and danger, how a child could fall through the cracks of the system and disappear unless someone cared enough to catch them. At Ava's middle school graduation, when she walked on stage to receive the valedictorian award, James and Liam were in the front row cheering with pride. But Ava looked past them to the bright blue sky and whispered, "I hope you can see me, Mom and Dad. I hope you know that I'm okay, that I found good people, that the courage you taught me saved not only my life but the lives of others, too." And she imagined that the warm wind that touched her face was their answer, a blessing, an approval, a reminder that love never really ends. It just transforms. Years later, when Ava was 15 and applying to colleges with an interest in emergency medicine, a journalist asked to interview her about her story, about how a 7-year-old girl had brought down a corruption network and survived when everything was against her. Ava agreed, but only if she could share a specific message. "What do you want people to know?" the journalist asked, camera rolling. Ava thought carefully before answering, "I want people to know that even when everything seems impossible, even when you've lost everything and you're alone and scared, you have power. The power to choose courage over giving up. The power to ask for help when you need it. The power to believe that good people exist and they will show up if you just hold on for one more day, one more hour, one more minute." She looked directly into the camera and continued, "And if anyone watching this is going through something hard, if you feel alone or scared or hopeless, I want you to know that you are not alone, that your story isn't over, that tomorrow could be the day everything changes. So please keep going. Please ask for help. Please believe that you deserve to be saved. Because you do." We all do. The interview went viral, shared millions of times. Ava received letters from all over the country, from people telling her how her story had inspired them, how they had found the courage to leave abusive situations or report crimes or simply keep going when they wanted to give up. Ava kept every letter in a special file because they were proof that pain can be transformed into purpose, that surviving can become thriving, that the street girl she once was had become something bigger, a symbol of resilience and hope. On the 10th anniversary of the night it all began, Ava and her family visited the alley where James had nearly lost his life, where Ava had made the decision to save a stranger, not knowing that choice would change everything. The alley didn't seem scary anymore in the daylight. It was just a piece of concrete between buildings, ordinary and forgettable except for what had happened there. Ava placed flowers where her father had fallen, where she had used the training he had given her to make a difference. And she said aloud, "Thank you for teaching me, Dad, for giving me the tools not just to survive but to help others. You saved more lives through me than you will ever know." James put his hand on her shoulder. "Your father would be so proud of the woman you are becoming, Ava, just as I am, just as Liam is, just as anyone who knows your story is. You took the worst moment of your life and turned it into something beautiful, something that matters. And that is the greatest act of courage I know." They drove home together, this unlikely family forged in tragedy but held together by love. And Ava thought about how strange life is, how you can lose everything and still find reasons to go on, how the worst nights can lead to the best dawns if you just hold on. And she knew with absolute certainty that while she would never forget the pain, while she would always carry the scars of what she survived, those scars did not define her. They were just part of the bigger story of who she was and who she was becoming. That night, Ava wrote in her journal something that would become her mantra. "Today, I choose to believe that tomorrow will be better. Today I choose to honor my pain by turning it into purpose. Today I choose to love the people who love me back. Today I choose to be grateful for what I have instead of bitter for what I lost. Today I choose to live instead of just survive." And she signed it with her full name, Ava Carolina Morgan. And for the first time, that name didn't feel strange. It felt right. It felt like home. It felt like her end of story. And if this story touched your heart, if you found inspiration in Ava's journey, we invite you to share this message of hope with others who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate the human spirit in the face of adversity. Leave a like if you believe that even in the darkest hours, we can find the light. And comment below, telling us which part of the story resonated with you the most, because your words matter, your story matters, you matter. And together, we can create a world where no child has to face what Ava faced alone, where family is defined not just by blood, but by love and choice and presence, where justice prevails over corruption, where courage conquers fear, and where hope always finds a way.